Welcome to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, where we provide constant improvement to businesses through timely, actionable financial solutions. Do you want answers to your financial questions? Email us at bsp@kaizencpas.com. I'm your host, Mark Valesky. Now let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Kaizen Time. I'm joined by Clay Hamlin, a partner here at the firm.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Clay, you work with a lot of businesses, some big, some small, some that they're hoping to grow. So just tell me, is bigger really better?
Yeah, I've heard many times business owners say, I just want to make this, I want it to be bigger. I want to be bigger. I want to be bigger. And it is a great question. Is that always better? And so I actually was thinking in preparation for this, right? I was thinking about this, and I did the whole sort of Ben Franklin balance sheet. Mm-hmm. And, like on the balance, you draw like a T, and then on the top of the T I put is bigger, better. Then there's positives and there's negatives. So like bigger is better is the right thing to do. I have like economies of scale. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, I've got lower overhead. So like on the negative, like for bigger isn't always better. I've got lower. So like really smaller businesses oftentimes have lower overhead. Like Amazon started in Jeff Bezos' garage. I think Apple started in a garage. Well, so when you're doing that, your overhead is going to be almost nothing.
Yep.
And so very small businesses can operate with extremely small overhead. So when someone says, well, on the question of overhead, is bigger better? Well, there's things on both sides, right? If the business is bigger, you can spread your overhead over more sales, because bigger, we're really talking about is more sales, right? Bigger revenue.
Well, and actually,
in that question,
I want to get into this too before we get too far into the weeds. Define bigger, because when clients tell you bigger, do they just mean I want a bigger number every year, or do they say, or is bigger more employees or a bigger footprint? Is it more revenue? Is it more profit? Because they're not exactly the same. So, and it's different for everyone, right?
Yeah. So if you're in a group, so like, let's say, for example, you're an auto repair shop and you're with one of the coaches, okay, right? And so in those, each coaching group will have groups of business owners that meet together, and there's competition. There's Joe over there has a $3 million shop. I only have a $2 million shop. How can I get my shop from $2 million to $3 million?
And they may be the same size too, right?
They may have the same profit, but they're not the same size. There's a difference between a $2 million shop and a $3 million shop.
Well, what I'm saying is, let's say they both have 4 bays or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. They may have the same footprint.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Okay. But generally when business owners get together in groups like this, the number that they're looking at in terms of size, right, is revenue. Now, they'll always say, well, I really want the highest profit. But when they compare, they're comparing revenue. And they think, just like a lot of things, I can make things better. So with the bigger revenue, I can have a bigger profit. Well, that's not always the case.
Yeah, it's not always the case.
Which is back to our question: is bigger better? And so here we have economies of scale. So if you have $3 million, if you're a $3 million shop, you can take your overhead costs and spread that over more revenue. So each revenue dollar has an equivalent or an amount of overhead that's costed towards that revenue dollar. So you might have, if you have one revenue dollar, you might have 20 cents of overhead that you're going to be spending. Mm-hmm. So if you have a $2 million shop, that might be 20%. If you are a $3 million shop, you think, well, is that 16 cents? And the answer isn't always yes. The answer, to get to a $3 million shop, maybe you need a little bit bigger plant, bigger
facility.
Facility. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And maybe now you have someone at reception, or, that sort of, there's things that maybe start to bake in. And so that's where you look at it and you go, well, the micro shop can have so little overhead that it's not even really an issue. But at some point, as you grow, you're going to have some overhead that's going to start hitting. You're not going to be able to operate your business out of your garage. You're not going to be able to operate with maybe a customer bathroom. There's things that are going to start happening. And so, yes, as you grow your business, once you get out of the sort of micro version,
out of the garage or out of the basement,
you're going to start now having some overhead. And now typically business or a bigger business will be able to spread those as long as the business owner pays attention and doesn't spend money wildly just because we have bigger gross revenue. So it is better as long as the business owner is paying attention, and you can get economies of scale. Another way to get economies of scale is like when you buy stuff, right? So if you say, well, I'm going to buy 5 pieces of equipment from you, Mr. or Mrs. Vendor, as opposed to 1, can I get 10% off?
Okay. All
right. So this is bargaining power. So economies of scale and bargaining power can be similar in some ways, but it's really kind of a different sort of thing. Economies of scale simply means as the gross revenue goes up, we can spread those dollars, but again, you have to pay attention. Part of paying attention is using bargaining power and buying smartly. So a friend of mine has told me many times that a business really makes their money by smart buying. And that really, it says there's a lot packed into that comment. But one of the things that's packed in there is smart buying. So if you have a bit bigger business, you should be able to, and you should at least try to use bargaining power to reduce your either per unit cost or your total cost.
I actually, I think I have a good example for this smart buying, because smart buying also has to do with patience, right?
Yep.
So a lot of these real estate people will wait until there's a crash or a bubble or whatever, and because they've been around, they know the signs and can recognize it, so they know when to buy this piece of property because it's going to be at a deal, and then they sit on it, sell it another time.
Right.
I actually had, as a business owner, he wanted to move into the DJ business. And not that he was waiting for this, but when COVID hit, a lot of DJs were going out of business. So, because who was having events during COVID? No one.
Right. Yep.
So all these DJs were just selling their equipment to pay their mortgage and put food on the table. And so he's buying it at, tiny margins for them.
Right.
And it was a steal for him. And therefore he was able to start his own business because he had liquid capital set aside, not for this, but available for it.
Yeah. So that's a bit of luck and
It is luck.
And a bit of using resources wisely.
But that is, would you say that kind of falls into that smart buying category?
Absolutely. Sure.
Okay.
Smart buying is super important for a business owner. Another one is resource management. So a bigger business tends to have, like people do like fewer things, but they don't do them well.
Okay.
And so if you have a bigger business, oftentimes you have resource diversity. So you have one person doing this, another person doing that, another person doing this. And if you cross-train to some degree, when someone gets sick or someone goes on vacation, or you just have all of a sudden you have a bunch of customers wanting a certain kind of thing, you can use your resource diversity to your advantage and get more things done or handle a problem. So like, let's say, for example, someone is out sick for a couple of weeks, and you have 3 people and they were all cross-trained. The other 2 can make up to some degree what the third person didn't get done. If you're a one-person shop and the person goes sick,
There you don't want to replace them.
You're stuck,
Yep.
right? So the business owner is now going to have to jump into that void. So in a bigger business, resource diversity can help you. On the flip side, a smaller business can have a tighter focus, oftentimes does, simply because they don't have the resource diversity to even have more offerings. So as you get in a bigger business and you have more offerings, which is oftentimes the case, by the way, because that has a sort of risk mitigation when you do more things, right, for customers. If one thing's hot and that's going really well, but then that sort of dies off. But if you're doing 4 or 5 other things, now the other...
It can keep you afloat, right?
Yeah, keeping you afloat. And you have different employees doing different things, so you have resource diversification. If there's no cross-training, that doesn't help you if something goes wrong or a resource all of a sudden, somebody leaves or something like that. If they're all doing, you have one person doing four different things because you have 4 offerings and one person does each, and you don't cross-train. If somebody leaves, now
you're not offering that.
You're kind of stuck again. It's sort of like the one offering shop with one person. If that person goes down, the owner has to jump in. So if you're going bigger, some amount of cross-training needs to happen. Otherwise, you end up with silos that the resource diversification isn't working to your advantage. So bigger can be better as long as, again, you're paying attention and doing some cross-training so that when something happens, which it will, you're using resource diversification to your advantage. The last part of this, it's not necessarily the last one, but I would say risk mitigation, which I just touched on. Again, if you're doing one thing and you're highly niched, maybe for example, you handle Chinese cars here in the U.S. as an auto repair shop. You only do Chinese cars. Well, if President Trump, for example, bans Chinese cars from the market,
that's your entire business.
What do you got?
Yep.
Whereas if you're doing maybe, 15 different brands, now you have some diversification so that if this kind of car is hot and you're doing well, or maybe, 10 of these are hot, you have some diversification in your offerings. And so if any one of those things sort of isn't doing so well, you have a lot of other options
you have that flexibility all of a sudden.
Exactly. Yeah.
As we kind of wrap this all up, my big question to you is, what do you tell a small business owner? They have a tiny shop or whatever who wants to grow their business. What piece of advice can you give them?
Some of it is like how you grow, right? Because I can't really say that bigger is better. I can only say that bigger can be better if you're managing well and you're doing a great job. Then sure, you will have more profits in the bottom line. If you're not paying as much of attention or you're letting costs creep in, it's not. Now you're just doing more for the same. And you're in the gerbil wheel and you're just having to go faster. So how you grow is super important. Be willing to say no. Be willing to grow in a way that you can control what's going on. You can control your costs, and you have things systematized and you have things compartmentalized within your business before you let the growth happen, before it gets too big. Because if you grow too big and you don't have your internals all lined up, your growth is going to actually be harmful.
So I want to jump on this and say, so it's not just the actual growing, it's the development, how it's growing. So like a tree, for example, if you let a tree grow and its branches just go wherever, it can fall apart, branches can fall down, it's not as healthy and so on. But if you prune it, make sure the branches are growing in an appropriate angle, right? It can bear more fruit.
Yeah. And I would also say one other thing is really watch your culture. So when you have a very small business, let's say you've got 2 employees, it's really easy for the business owner to keep tight reins over culture. You know each employee well. You know exactly what's happening at practically all times, except for when you're on vacation. If you have, say, 50 employees, right, maybe over multiple locations, that's going to be a lot more difficult for you to maintain culture, and yet you have to. So how are you going to do that?
Great point.
And each business owner needs to answer that question for themselves. There's a ton of books, a ton of resources on how to do this, and maybe as a podcast in and of itself, but keep a watch on your culture.
Perfect. Thank you, Clay.
Thanks, Mark.
You've been listening to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave a 5-star review. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs Plus Advisors, providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com or email us at bsb@kaizencpas.com.